Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Craig Savage, and with me, as always, is Mr. Daniel Cody. Today, this is a local one to us. It's our very own Luton Town. Nathan Jones has left the club. He went on to manage to join Southampton in the Premier League, and in place now is Rob Edwards, the former Forest Green and Watford manager. So let's talk about the previous manager like we normally do, because they normally get sacked. But this one, the man left. He got offered a new job higher up, and that is Nathan Jones. The second incoming, obviously, Nathan Jones, we all know the past story. He managed us back in League Two, in the stages of the League One, left us to go to Stoke. Didn't have a great time at Stoke. Came back to Luton during the pandemic and kept Luton up, and it's always been a progress from there.
Yeah, it has. And if I remember rightly, I think Nathan Jones' second coming was our first ever manager special, if I remember rightly. So let's hope this one's not the last, because that would be a disaster of some sorts. But he did a really good job coming back. And let's be fair, most fans at the time were puzzled, perplexed. It was in the middle of lockdown. We were about 10 points from safety. There were 9 games to go. We didn't know at the time if and when the football season was going to restart, whether or not we'd be going straight down to League One on points per game or whatever else. But he came in, produced, let's call it a miracle to survive, because it was a miracle to survive in that first little stint. And then the next season, we were very solid. And then it culminated last year with a playoff push. And you can see the progression behind the scenes. The connection between board, club and fans is something very unique. And I think, to be fair, most Luton fans don't begrudge him going this time. I think, unlike what we saw with the Stoke situation, he's going for the right reasons, for a big step up to the biggest league in world football. And look, let's be fair, if you take aside the Luton fan bias, if most managers are at Luton Town and Southampton come calling, you're going to go, aren't you? And that's a fair point to make. They're an established Premier League club. He's earned his chance. And to be fair, it's just great to see a young British manager getting a chance in the Premier League now. So I say good luck to him. I know we'll get onto it probably a bit later on when we talk about the new man. I was a little surprised that Chris Cohen went with him, someone who'd wanted to become a number one before. I thought that might happen initially. And obviously Alan Sheehan, a former skipper, but all did a great job for us. I don't think any fans begrudge it. And obviously we've got to support Southampton now, because we get healthy bonuses if they stay up the next 2 years.
Yeah,
great money as well. Sorry, great money.
Oh, yeah, for at least 4 million for the club.
Second biggest ever transfer.
He's got more transfers than our highest players for any player. No, but obviously Nathan Jones, he brought a lot to the club, considering where we were, as you say, in certain situations. What will you miss from Nathan Jones, either on the dugout or his post-match interviews, or just in general vibes?
I don't know if it's miss as much, but I think the hardest thing to get used to is going to be, I know we'll talk about the new man in a moment, but he's very, from what we've seen at his former clubs, very calm and measured in the dugout. And obviously Nathan Jones' initial way to get the fans on board was to be extremely emotive, both with gestures and words. So that's perhaps going to be the hardest bit for fans to get used to, not having a fist-pumping, all-encompassing, running around manager like a lunatic. But it is something Luton fans are going to miss, because it was part of what brought the club back together. We had John Still before, who was probably a bit more similar to the new man in terms of character, and just built those foundations, as he always said. And then Nathan Jones came along and added a little bit of spice on top. But there's no denying that between him, Cohen and Sheehan, the thing we're going to miss most is excellent coaching, because I know a lot's made of the fact it wasn't very young players at times, but definitely improved players who had previously never played at the levels they've now reached. So that's something that the new man's got to live up to, and probably the thing that we'll miss most from a coaching point of view, and the reason he's been taken to the Premier League.
It's not a cheerleader or anything like that, but it's a way to get the players and the fans going. And especially with a ground like Kenilworth Road, small, compact grounds, as said, it seems it's worked, because it's progression every year. So that's always going to be a tough one to take. And obviously it kind of reflects that, what the post game against Rotherham, when I know Mickey Hartford's in charge, and obviously Mick Hartford's a Luton legend and everything like that, but it still felt something missing, especially going down goal down early. But we will miss Nathan. We will wish him the very best at Southampton, and it's a Premier League job. You can't deny it's a Premier League job.
And hopefully he does well for other Championship managers moving forward as well.
Well, yeah, well, the thing is, you look at Steve Cooper's starting now to get, well, no, it's got a squad to gelling, but he's now starting to win games as a Premier League manager. In time, hopefully, Nathan Jones will do the same. Now he's got that break for the World Cup. He can actually work on his players and hopefully get a good January transfer window. But it'd still be young players that he can actually work on. But that's now Nathan Jones is gone. We've enjoyed the last 6 years of Nathan Jones. It feels so sad to say it. But let's move on to the new manager. The new manager is Rob Edwards, a former Forest Green and Watford manager. Well, I say Watford manager. Everyone seems to be a Watford manager nowadays. But let's have a look at the club statement from Luton Town. Rob Edwards has said he's absolutely delighted to be here. It's a really exciting opportunity to manage this great football club, and I can't wait to get started. From the outside, looking in at Luton Town, you will see a well-run football club, and that's a club that's growing, moving forward, and competing at the right end of the Championship. It's a club that did fantastically well last season and is doing so well now. When the opportunity opened up, straight away, you can see the terrific group of players there and a club that is only looking in one direction. Gary Sweet, the CEO of Luton Town, he said, on behalf of the board and recruitment team and the whole club, we're more than delighted to be able to secure a long-term commitment of Rob Edwards. From lengthy conversations with him, he immediately bought into our values as a club. We have deep discussions about our culture, our opportunities, and our threats. So a 3.5-year deal for Rob Edwards.
Minimum
3.5-year deal. So Luton are putting the boat out there. They always give managers, they always give managers time, apart from Graham Jones. But it's a club that has its own structure, has its own way, and they're not going to change their ways just to suit one man.
No, absolutely. And it's the right way as well. I know there's a few in a younger generation coming through now of Luton fans that maybe obviously are too young to remember it. But for most of our childhoods, as in the two of us, we watch Luton dip in and out of administration, get 3 successive relegations, all via points deductions. And we've seen what happens when you live beyond your means. We've still got the smallest stadium in the league. We've still got one of the smallest budgets in the league. And there's no denying it. Under Nathan Jones, we overachieve magnificently and continue to do so as it stands at the minute. So Luton, particularly while Gary Sweet's in charge with Mick Harford around as well, they're not going to lose sight of that. That isn't going to change. And it's about finding the person who will buy into that. There were obviously a few Luton fans getting a bit exuberant, asking for your Dyche and Wilders, and we don't want anyone else. But that ain't Luton budget. That isn't going to happen. So impressed to see that we've gone for another young coach. It was always going to be the way. And I think you mentioned something I was worried about initially, which was the Graham Jones era. And the reason I mentioned that is someone who had never managed before at any level, because he came in, we knew he was a fantastic coach, a world-class coach, even by the clubs and the countries he'd worked with. But what caught him out was he couldn't handle the media, and man management was absolutely awful. And that was something we couldn't afford a repeat of. So to have someone who has been in clubs and has been well liked, who has managed youth teams in terms of England under 16s and has worked with some of the elite youngsters in the country, and of course, another manager who won an EFL Manager of the Season award last year, just as Nathan Jones did, I feel it's the right move. I know he's got that stint at Watford, which a few fans mentioned, but let's be honest. I think someone summed it up pretty well. If we rule out every former Watford manager with respect, we're going to be down to a very small list of candidates soon. So I think it's the right decision. The board have gone for someone young, someone who's proven themselves to be very good at the level they've managed. And let's be fair, he left Watford 1 point outside the playoffs after 9 or 10 league games. It was hardly a disaster. So I think he'll suit the style a bit better. You look at the way Watford played, and I know we'll get on to it, at that start of the season. And I know some of the Watford fans weren't happy about it, and maybe it didn't suit the players there. But the way he played at Forest Green potentially suits our team quite well. So overall, I'm quite encouraged by it. But a bit like you said, after 6 years largely of Nathan Jones, you don't really know what to expect or what's going to happen, because it almost feels like Luton has become a Nathan Jones team rather than a Luton Town team.
Well, yeah, it's always going to be tough. If you look at other clubs like Man United and Arsenal, I know I'm trying to compare Luton to Man United and Arsenal, but we have a manager that has a bit of longevity. It's always going to be finding it tough post a man that's been so successful. It was a bit easier for Mick Harford because Mick Harford didn't do anything really. He just kept it as it is, and it was always going to work. And Luton won the league. But Graham Jones tried to tweak too many things, and it didn't work. I can see Rob Edwards not tweaking too much, but have his own little bit of style as well.
Yeah, I think ultimately, looking at Forest Green last year, they tried to play a little bit more football probably than we do. And that's something that Nathan Jones has adapted. I mean, in League One and League Two, Luton were a narrow diamond, a total football team playing wonderful stuff, exhilarating stuff, quick counter-attacking. And the last year and a half or so, with the profile of players we've been playing very direct in a back three. It's something that's benefited us in the last couple of years. But I think the issue Rob Edwards might have is, and I've got a sneaky suspicion it's going to happen given where their deficiencies are. I think Southampton will come in for Adebayo in January, and I think that will potentially change the way he has to play. But with the squad he's got to work with, the hard thing's going to be that Luton are drastically overachieving by budget and by reputation of club in the last 15, 20 years. So anything, even if he did par for the course with Luton, he'd probably be considered a failure compared to Nathan Jones. That's the hard thing for someone coming in. But if you can keep the unity, if you can keep this squad together, I can only see a positive year for Luton. I know the big point was made in the statement about 1 point off the playoffs, but the championship this year is bonkers. It's 7 points off the relegation zone as well. I mean, anything can change.
You say 1 point outside the playoffs, but that's the same situation with Watford, and they still sacked him. So maybe it's a little sly dig at Watford there as well. In the
I think there were a couple, weren't there, in that statement?
But he's our man now, and yeah, it's 10 games for God's sake. But he'll definitely have more than 10 games at Luton. But end of the day, my personal opinion, we said this when we did the manager special for him back in the summer. I don't think it was a good move for Rob Edwards because of the culture of Watford, and that got proved right after 10 games. But where Rob Edwards can lay a foundation, if he laid that foundation at Forest Green, he can definitely lay a foundation with his Luton side because they seem to be a small bunch, not egocentric. I think the word of Watford players are a bit more egocentric because obviously the Premier League wage, all that stuff.
Well, they're bigger names, aren't they? They're international footballers, etc.
Yeah, but but Luton and Forest Green, they're kind of similar in a way where they've got a small group, they all work together, got an outstanding goal scorer. Obviously, Forest Green's goal scorer got injured and he's out for a long time. Luton got at least a couple of strikers. Well, at the moment, they've got a couple of strikers and Adebayo and Morris that can score goals. But they got other players. Luton got other players as well that can potentially score. Luke Berry, if he stays fit, you saw him. He scored 2 in the last 3 games. It can easily work for Rob Edwards. Like obviously, he's going to have his own staffing because obviously Luton staff are gone, bar goalkeeping coaches. But if Rob Edwards gets time, he can work on this side. Let's be honest. I don't think Luton are going down. Do you think Luton are going down? Because that's normally the same question on the asked. Do you think Luton will get relegated? And do you think he'll see out this 3.5 year deal? But the foundations are there for Luton. They're more than good enough to easily be in the top half.
Yeah, the only question for him really is, can he keep the unity of the squad and get them on board? I know the club have mentioned it. It's a good time. And the same will apply to Wigan. If they appoint this week, the new manager will have a month to work with the squad. And that can make a real difference. I know they're already planning 1 or 2 friendlies during that time. So there will be a bit of getting used to the style of play, getting used to the squad and any changes you want to make. Obviously, whether it'll be a back 5 or a back 4, we don't know yet. But I don't see Luton being in any relegation threat, and that's not just bias. I do probably think we're less likely to make the playoffs this year now. I think that's a fair assessment as well, because there are a lot of teams starting to fly up the league. I've given you my thoughts on Middlesbrough appointing Carrick, people like that. I think there's some really good flyers coming up from further down a division. And I guess the only other slight issue with Rob Edwards is Forest Green didn't finish well last season. For all that he did at the club, they were 15, 20 points clear of the rest of the league by the top 2. And they did stumble towards the line for a large part. So there are some arguments on that front, looking at the second half of the season. But, I mean, it's a classic Luton appointment. It's a manager that's got a lot to prove. It's a team that have got something to prove now as well. Are they just going to crumble because Nathan Jones isn't there, which was the accusation of Graham Jones when he was at the club. And obviously for the board, it's a win-win situation because they've bought the last manager back in Nathan Jones and the fans were worried about it. And it was a manager who maybe a lot of fans had reservations about. And it's the same now, but he's earned the chance because Gary Sweet got the last one so right with Nathan Jones coming back. And for Rob Edwards, I think there's trust. And that probably wouldn't be the situation if the club wasn't in such a healthy position. But overall, I'm encouraged. I'm cautiously optimistic. But given the start we've got after the international break, which I know you'll get to in a second, there are some worries there still, because the first few fixtures are bloody awful.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head with proving a point. He will definitely want to prove a point. Obviously, he had the 10 games down the road and was harshly sacked, but he want to prove a point because no, I can actually prove my worth in the Championship, and he can easily do it with Luton. Looking at the next few fixtures post reset. Middlesbrough away, Mill at home, Norwich at home, and then QPR away for the rest of the
start.
It's not the easiest to start as well, because Middlesbrough, as I said, new manager in Michael Carrick. He's starting to get his team to work well now. Got a couple of victories in there. Millwall started to turn around the corner. Had that little bit of a weird patch.
In the top Norwich now.
Then Norwich, obviously, Luton beat them not too long ago. In and out of form. I think they needed this break. And QPR, since Michael Beale obviously turned down Wolves, in and out of form themselves. So it's not the easiest of starts for Luton, but teams like Luton, they do pick up points here and there and everywhere.
Yeah, and generally we have been better, particularly at home against the bigger sides this year that have come out and tried to attack us. So it might work into his hands. But of course, the other thing we haven't mentioned is after that, there's then the January transfer window. Who comes in for some of our players who have been overachieving and proven it at Championship level for now a year and a half, 2 years? Can we bolster the squad a bit? Because there are some positions on the pitch.
Defensively, we're short.
Well, that's it. There's some positions on the pitch where we've got an awful an awful injury record, or we're playing players that last year were backup players. And although they've done very well, it is an area that may need to be bolstered. So I'll be interested to see what happens on that front. Of course, he probably knows as part of that Gary Sweet statement, he's not going to have a lot of money to work with. But overall, it's going to be a stinking start. If he can pick up a couple of results out of those 4 games, I think people will calm down and it'll all be okay. But the worry with a start like that is you have 1 point out of 4 games or 2 points out of 4 games, and then you start to look over your shoulder a bit because, as you said, the Championship table is nuts this year.
I said a couple of results here and there, Luton to be up there in the top 6, and doesn't if they're losing, all right, they'll be mid-table again because everyone else needs to win. But it's not a bad start. It's not the worst. Well, it is quite a bad start, but it'll be fine. I think Rob Edwards will be fine. He'll have his own way. He has his own philosophy, and Luton fans will back him. Forget the 10 games of Watford. Look at his last season, and also we've actually watched him manage against Forest Green last season in the FA Cup, and he lost.
Lose
but it don't really matter about
that.
That's the FA Cup. It's the FA Cup. It's the only thing that happened in the FA Cup. We know that. But overall, good appointment. A young, proven coach. It's the Luton way, really. Build him up, and then obviously, if he does a similar job to Nathan Jones, then everyone's a winner. And hopefully, in these 3.5 years, Luton could have a new stadium. But those are our thoughts on the departure of Nathan Jones to Southampton and the hiring of Rob Edwards as Luton Town's new manager. Let us know in the comments what you think of the appointment of Rob Edwards and give us your predictions how he will get on. Do you think it will last for 3.5 years? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. And we'll see you next time.